Well, joining me now to discuss all of the big stories today is Saturday Herald Sun columnist Steve Price. Great to see you tonight, Steve. Look, I want to start with this story, front page of The Australian today. Victorian barristers are divided over whether the Victorian Bar Association should support the Voice to Parliament referendum. We've seen comments from eminent lawyer Stuart Wood. He claims that some barristers are motivated by commercial gains in publicly supporting the referendum. Steve, how is this dispute unfolding?
I think it's fascinating, g'day Sharri, that Stuart Wood has intervened, and to read his reasons and excuses for not supporting the Voice, I think were really insightful. I mean, he's made the point that if you are a senior lawyer, KC, or a senior litigator of some sort, it's very dangerous for you to suddenly put your hand up and say, well, I'm voting no for the Voice. Now, the Victorian Bar Council wants to act as one group, and there's many lawyers like Stuart who've decided to say, well, we're not going to do that. And his reasoning is fascinating. It says, if you were a senior lawyer making good coin out of a corporation, like a big corporation, or out of government departments, you're hardly going to put your name to a no vote because you would then perhaps lose some of that work that's made you quite wealthy. I thought it was fascinating. We always say, you know, go woke and go broke. In the case of lawyers, Sharri, I think it's the opposite. If you go woke, you stay rich. It's quite extraordinary.
Well, I think you're also going to see a lot of corporate CEOs come out and support the Voice when it might not necessarily be their own individual beliefs again for this, you know, sense of being popular or even corporate profit. Now, I want to move on to another topic. Senator Lidia Thorpe, we saw that amazing interview that her father gave with Andrew Bolt last week. She's now addressed her father's accusations of racism. She says that she's a loving person and has herself been subject to racist attacks. What else did she have to say?
She doesn't particularly give me the impression that she's a loving person. I don't think she gives the rest of Australia that impression either. I, like you, thought it was very brave for her father to go on with Andrew, and it was extraordinary to see him talk about her background, Irish, British background, and not just her Indigenous background. So Lidia Thorpe is now saying that, you know, she loves her father, but she's being misunderstood. I mean, I don't think anyone misunderstands Lidia Thorpe. I just get a sense, though, in those comments that she made in relation to her father's interview, that she might be starting to get a bit dented. I mean, one thing I would say, I think that she made the point that the AFP have warned her that she could be at risk of some physical attack from right-wing people who are against the things that she's talking about. If that's true, that's a very disturbing thing. But I think her dad has balanced things up, and I think Lidia Thorpe would do well now to take some of the advice that her father gave her, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I do think it was I think it was brilliant that Andrew Bolt got the interview, but very harsh to have your father telling the whole of Australia that you're racist on national television. But parents and children often have difficult relationships. Steve, the Attorney-General has stepped in to defend the Victorian government over the damning IBAC report. This was the corruption report, you'll remember, was handed down last week. It found that ministerial advisors in Daniel Andrews' own government improperly influenced bureaucrats over the awarding of the health grant. It found misconduct, not corruption, as defined under the Act. But this is damning because at the time, Daniel Andrews said that this was an educational report. And here's the Victorian Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, today.
I think it says a lot about the Premier's views on corruption and integrity. It was not an educational report. It was a damning report.
Wow. What do you make of those comments, Steve?
I heard it live. I nearly drove off the road, to be honest. Bang. I mean, this is the Ombudsman of Victoria who handed the report originally on to the IBAC because she felt that it was so serious that she couldn't deal with it. There she is live on radio on 3RW with Neil Mitchell this morning saying that, hang on, what he's saying is not right. This is the Premier. It wasn't educational. It was actually corruption, and those are the words that she used. I mean, this, you and I spoke about this last week. Daniel Andrews sort of stood up there for an hour, intimidated the media like he does every time he has one of these media conferences. But how long can this bloke keep doing this to to Victorian voters and the Victorian public when you've got someone as highly regarded as the Ombudsman. And you've got to say, Sharri, how brave is she coming out speaking? Her contract, as I understand it, runs out at the end of this year. And so maybe she feels that she's willing to come out and make those comments in the face of what the Premier said. But all credit to her. What a brave thing for her to do today, and good on her for doing it.
Completely agree. I mean, the Premier was basically gaslighting Victorians. You had this serious IBAC report, a serious corruption report. Yes, it didn't meet corruption under the Act, but it outlined very serious misconduct, no public tender for the awarding of this health grant to a Labor-affiliated union, and yet Daniel Andrews got away with standing up there at a press conference and dismissing it as educational, and, you know, everyone just moves on. But luckily, the Ombudsman did come out today. Now, former Victoria top cop Ken Lay, he's begun community consultation on an injecting room for Melbourne CBD. He's been surveying residents on the safety of the facility. Now, I know you have strong feelings about this, Steve. We've just seen the injecting room get the go-ahead in Richmond, and now they're looking at another one. How many do you need in Melbourne?
Yeah. The short history of this is the Victorian government spent $61 million of taxpayers' money to buy a building in Flinders Street. They were going to stick a second injecting facility in there. The local traders blew up big time and said that's not the place for it. Victorians blew up big time and said we don't need a second one, we don't need it, certainly in the middle of the city. I mean, this building's across the road from Flinders Street Station, the most busy train station in all of Melbourne. Now, Ken Lay's been doing this report since 2020. He finished the report in 2021. And it's gone into the bottom drawer of the Premier's desk. He didn't want it out there during the election campaign, and now suddenly you have an online survey on a Victorian government website where you can object if you don't like it or support it if you do. I did that survey today. It's full of loaded questions, and it's not going to come up with an honest answer. The suspicion now is that the government has worked out that they're going to cop it big time if they put this thing where they bought that building, $61 million, I should remind people. And so what they might now be talking about doing, Sharri, God forbid, is to have a mobile heroin injecting facility, presumably trawling around the suburbs where heroin use is a problem, allowing people to get in there and inject heroin, dispose of their needles and go on their way. It's just incredible that the government still has not released the Ken Lay report. We may never see it.
Now, I want to ask you another story based in Melbourne. The Melbourne International Comedy Festival denies it's cancelling Barry Humphries, of course, after the late, great icon passed away on the weekend. It says it's considering how to honour him. This is after they had earlier changed the name of an award that was originally named after him. Look, his character, Dame Edna Everage, was central to Australian comedy. He founded this festival. The way they've behaved and conducted themselves in the wake of his passing and before is despicable.
Disgraceful, and I agree with Piers Morgan, who used even stronger words, Sharri, that you and I just used. I mean, look, Barry Humphries he was the one who got that comedy festival up and running, as you say. I spoke to a leading Melbourne comedian. I spoke to two. I won't use their names because they've asked me not to. One of them said that all the comedians still use the Barry term when they get that award. So despite what the Comedy Festival has done in dumping his name off the award, they say when they win it, they call it the Barry. Another leading comedian, a veteran leading comedian, would not this week, was not prepared to answer any questions or even reflect on the career of Barry McKenzie because of what they refer to as his remarks on trans people. This is disgraceful what the Comedy Festival has done. I hope that the woman running the Comedy Festival loses her job. She deserves to. And I hope the comedians of Melbourne have the guts to come out and do what they should do and pay proper tribute to the greatest comedian that this country's ever produced.
Absolutely perfect words, Steve Price. So great to see you as always, and we'll see you on the show next Wednesday.